Hello there. We are continuing on our lesson Reproduction in Plants 2, and we are going to be looking at reproduction in plants in details. Now, objective of this lesson is to explain reproduction in plants, describe a sexual reproduction in plants, describe sexual reproduction in plants, and also explain pollination, stating its type. So, reproduction in plants or plant reproduction is the production of new offspring in plants which can be accomplished by sexual or asexual reproduction. Now, asexual reproduction in plants. Asexual reproduction in plants occurs through budding, fragmentation, vegetative propagation, and spore formation. Now, no flowers are required for this method of reproduction. Vegetative propagation of plants is of two types, and that is natural and artificial vegetative propagation. Now, these are the examples of natural vegetative propagation methods. We have the runners, we have the suckers, we have the bulb, the rhizome, the tubers, and the plantlets. Now, examples of plants that are propagated using runners, we have an example here. We have strawberries. Suckers, we have the banana or plantain. Bulb, we have the onions. Rhizome, we have the ginger. Tubers, we have the potato. And the plantlets, we have the bryophyllum. Now, for proper description of the natural vegetative propagation, we have the stem tubers, which are underground stems swollen with stored food. Now, the stem is cut into pieces, with each piece having some buds on it. Now, each piece is buried in a mound, and the buds sprout and produce young stem. An example is yam. Now, rhizomes are underground stems that grow horizontally, parallel and close to the surface of the earth. They have many buds and are buried in the soil. Examples are ginger and canna lily. Suckers are young plants that grow out of the parent plant, usually at the base of the parent. They are uprooted and planted, and they grow into parent plants, giving out their yield. An example is plantain. Other examples are banana and pineapple. Bulbs. These are organs which are made up of flat stems on which grow fleshy leaves covered by scaly leaves. Examples are onions. While the last one here are the culms. These are a continuation of the stems underground. Such underground stems grow vertically and have buds on them. And a typical example is the cocoa yam. Now, we also have artificial vegetative propagation. Now, examples of artificial vegetative propagation are stem cutting, layering, budding, and grafting. Now, stem cutting involves the cutting of the stem into pieces, with each piece having two or more buds on it, which are planted. Examples are cassava, hibiscus. Layering. Layering is a branch is held and bent to touch the ground, which is then pegged to the ground. Now, the part that touches the ground gives out roots, while the growing tip of the branch grows to bear leaves. In budding, you get two plants of the same species. The buds in the back of one plant is removed and fixed on the stem of another plant to bear a new variety of fruits. While finally, in grafting, it involves a scion and a stalk, just like budding. You see in the next slide the presentation. Now, as I said, this is cutting. As you can see here in demonstration, you cut a part of the parent plant and you replant it again. So this is cutting. While budding, you get the bud from one plant of the same species, which is attached to the scion of another species, which, when joined together, produces a variety of plants which have both the quality of the two species. Now, this is an example of the grafting. So you have the scion and the stalk. So when tied up together, will produce another variety of plants similar to budding. While layering, as you can see from the description that we made in the previous slide, so you can see that the branch of a particular plant is bent and pegged to the ground, while the one inside the soil will produce the roots. The one that comes out of the soil will produce, a stem. Now, moving along, we are going to be focusing more on sexual reproduction in plants. Sexual reproduction occurs in flowering plants that bear fruit. The reproductive organ in flowering plants is the flower. The flower is the reproductive organ in flowering plants. Now, flowering plants reproduce sexually through a process called pollination. Flowers contain male sex organs called stamens and female sex organs called pistil. The anther is the part of the stamen that contains pollen, or what we call pollen grains. Now, pollen contains the male gametes. Now, this pollen must be moved to a part of the pistil called the stigma for reproduction to take place. Now, we're going to look at the structure of a flower. Now, as you can see, this part of the flower is called the pistil. That's the female part, which contains the stigma, style, and ovary. Now, within the ovary, you have the eggs or the female gametes called the ovule. Now, the male part of the flower is called the stamen, which contains the anther, the pollen grains, and the filament. Now, we also have the petal, which is the colorful part of the flower, and we have the sepal. Now, the sepal is a small, tough, leaf-like structure. Yes, when the flower is in bud, a group of sepals lay over each other like tiles on a roof to protect it. The sepal form a ring called the calyx. Now, the petals are found in plants that use insects to pollinate their flowers. So, this petal attracts insects which help to pollinate the flower. Now, some petals produce scent, and the color and the scent attracts insects to the flower. Now, the petals form a ring called the corolla. Now, inside the corolla are the stamens. As I said earlier, we have the stamen, and the stamen helps to produce pollen grains. Now, these pollen grains are required to pollinate the female part of this bisexual flower. So, inside the ring of stamen is the male part of the male part. This stamen makes up the male reproductive organ in a flower, while the pistil makes the female part of the flower. Now, moving along, we are looking at pollination. From the earlier definition, we said that pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther into the stigma of a particular flower. This is a diagrammatic representation of this process, and that process, or pollination, is the process of sexual reproduction in flowering plants. And we have a pollinator right here. Now, as you can see, this is one flower, this is another flower. So the transfer of pollen grains from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower is what we call cross-pollination. Whereas in a bisexual flower, which has both the male and the female reproductive organs, the passing of the pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same flower is what we call self-pollination. So this is a diagrammatic representation of cross-pollination, which shows that the pollen grain moves from the anther to the stigma of another flower. So now we've come to the end of today's lesson. Now, to take a quick look at the summary. Plant reproduction is the production of new offspring in plants, which can be accomplished by either sexual or asexual reproduction method. The sexual reproduction in plants occurs through budding, fragmentation, vegetative propagation, and spore formation. No flowers are required for this method. Now, vegetative propagation of plants are of two types: natural and artificial vegetative propagation. Whereas in sexual reproduction, flowering plants bear fruits. The reproductive organ in flowering plants is the flower. Now, therefore, we've come to the end of our lesson for today. I want to pause this video and attempt to answer the questions in this assessment slide, and I'll see you again in the next lesson. Bye bye.